All right. Welcome to part 3 of our series, The Real Story of the Strong Black Woman. This is Maintaining Radical Joy as an Ambitious Black Woman. I am Dr. Taisha Caldwell-Harvey. I go by Dr. Tai. I am a licensed psychologist and the founder of the Black Girl Doctor. The Black Girl Doctor is a virtual mental health practice that specializes in therapy, coaching, and workplace wellness programs. I am excited to be joined today by two clinicians from our team, Dr. Shelly-Ann Collins-Rawle, who goes by Dr. Shelly, and Dr. Jillian Lynum, who goes by Dr. Jill. And I would love each of you to please introduce yourselves. And for those who are attending live today, if you could please just give them some love as they introduce themselves by throwing up a fist bump in the chat or a heart or a hey girl or however it is that you welcome your sisters. We'll start with Dr. Shelly, if you please introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Tai. I go by Dr. Shelly, and I'm a licensed psychologist who specializes mostly in relationships, racial, gender, and sexual minority mental health, multicultural competence, and in the promotion of access, equity, and inclusion. Bam, bam. I work from a strength-based practice, usually utilizing relational cultural therapy, some humor, and of course, evidence-based practices. Sending it over to Dr. Jill.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shelley. Thank you also, Dr. Ty. I am Dr. Jill. I'm happy to be here with all of you. I'm a senior therapist here at the Black Girl Doctor with nearly 10 years or so of clinical experience. The majority of my work has been working in forensic settings, but also psychiatric hospitals and community mental health settings with areas of expertise working with individuals across the lifespan, specifically with mood disorders, behavioral disorders, substance abuse, and a little bit of trauma and grief and loss as well. I believe in being relatable and authentic when working with individuals to build rapport.
Thank you both. And thank you to those who are showing some love in the chat. We want to get you using the chat, so please say hello. Hello, we see y'all talking to us. Hi, Imani. Hi, Zena. We also have with us today Barrio, who is an aspiring Black Girl Doctor and a first-year PhD student in the counseling psychology program at the University of Florida. She helped us produce this series and is monitoring the chat, and will also be moderating our Q&A today. So Corey, if you could unmute for a second and say hello.
Hello. I am so happy to be here. And thank you guys so much for having me involved in this amazing series. So excited for tonight.
Thank you. And we are looking at the chat. Corey's going to help everybody out. So some of y'all are talking only to the panelists and not to everybody else. We want to make sure everybody can see your comments. So if you are talking only to panelists, Corey's going to message you and let you know to change your settings so you're talking to everyone. Please be encouraged to be active in the chat and share your reflections with us as we move through the conversation. It just makes things so much more fun and impactful. And if you have a question that you want us to answer specifically, please drop that in the Q&A feature so we can easily find those every time we pause for questions. We certainly want to take your questions today. So with that, we are going to show some results from this poll. So I'm going to share the results from the poll with everybody. We asked y'all a few questions as you were waiting to come in. One, does your ambition, example, striving towards success professionally or personally, cause you great stress or interfere with your emotional health? It looks like for a couple folks said not really, but for more than half of us, we're saying yes or sometimes. Does your workspace value joy? Again, 13% says no, and the rest says sometimes or yes, which I think that's pretty great. Do you ever feel guilty for engaging in joy instead of working? We got 63% that say nah, not at all. I think that's amazing, which means we are shifting already away from this duty to feel like we're working all of the time. And then we ask the question, are you happy? We have 63% says yes, 38% says I am not sure, and nobody is saying no at this point. So very interesting. I think we have a lot to talk about, to even just to say the least. But I think we should get into it. Y'all agree? Where are we in the chat? Should we just kind of get into this? Let me, 1 second.
Corey's like, get into it. Oh, Momo.
Okay, there we
Yeah,
go.
thank you, Momo. I tried.
Oh, thank you. See, y'all so flattering. So we love being in a room with beautiful, beautiful Black women. So thank y'all for joining. Okay, so back to what I was saying. I think we should get started. And I really think we should start with the basics. We use the words happiness and joy in our language every day, and so much, but I often find that a lot of us don't really know what it means to be happy or what it means to have joy. Dr. Shelley, from a clinical perspective, can you talk for a minute about
Dr.
what
Ty,
is-
you're breaking up. Are you seeing that, Dr. Jill?
Yeah, I am.
You're back.
I'm back?
Yeah.
Okay, of course, as soon as I start going in, then we're I'm
You're
like,
on
let's
a
get
roll.
started. And then okay, everybody can hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, please pause me if I break up again. Okay, so I'm going to start that question over again and just share that I think we should start with the basics. And we literally use the word happiness and joy in our everyday language so much, but I find that a lot of us don't actually know what it means to be happy, what it means to have joy. And Dr. Shelley, I'm hoping you can weigh in here and just from a clinical perspective, what is happiness and what does it look like? How do we know if we have it?
Well, positive psychology is the study of happiness. So here comes along one of the theorists that said, why are we continuing to look at mental illness and not mental wellness? Like, what is it that makes, and this is Dr. Seligman, what is it that makes us happy? And maybe we should study that. And so was the birth of positive psychology. There is one quote that says, happiness is not a matter of intensity, but of balance and order and rhythm and harmony. And I don't know this guy, Thomas Merton, but I thought what he said was pretty spot on. And so what positive psychology says is that it theorizes that happiness has 3 dimensions: learning to enjoy and appreciate basic pleasures like our companionship or puppies smelling the flowers, discovering our own unique virtues and strengths, and then enhancing our lives with those strengths and virtues in the service of either something greater than ourselves or in service to others, right? So purpose and fulfillment. And so from a clinical perspective, we look at those 3 dimensions.
That is, and I'm imagining we're thinking about those all kind of roped into one. Like, am I experiencing all 3 of these, not all 3 of these, one of these? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. So sometimes when people come into my office, it is, right, do I have this sense of purpose? I feel like, nothing I'm doing matters. And so there is a sense of imbalance, not feeling happy or content. Or there is a sense of like you are just going at the grind, you feel like you have a purpose, but you're not enjoying all the things that are happening. You're not in the moment, you're not present because you're too busy thinking about the next thing and the next thing and the next promotion, right? And so there's that absence of being able to enjoy simple pleasures or even being in the moment. And so when we think of the happiness, we're thinking about what are these 3, I think about the Venn diagram. I'm very visual. So I'm like, think of that Venn diagram. And in the center of those lapping circles, right? I'm hoping that everyone's following me with Venn diagrams, right? Is in the center of that is this well-being, is this happiness? And the last piece of it is, are we, because sometimes we are selfish, but we also feel like we could be doing more to help others. And I think that's why a large number of us are in professions or in spaces in where we take care of others or we give back with others, is because that has something to do with how we feel about ourselves as well.
I love that. I love that. I love thinking about it visually as a Venn diagram. You have all of these things. Are they converging? And is that something that is bringing you something that we're calling happiness, right? Those things coming together. Dr. Jill, would you talk about connecting joy and happiness, right? I feel like I don't like to get too technical with things, but there could be some differences. And I think it's just as important to talk about sometimes what things are as it is to talk about what things are not. And I'm curious if you can talk about the ways you've seen people get it wrong. And, are people out here striving for something that doesn't exist? Like, what are some of the ways you've seen people get it wrong?
Yeah, I think what Dr. Shelley mentioned about being in the moment versus overall, I tend to think of joy and happiness as being joy being more in the moment, happiness being more longer term. When we think about the concept of joy and being overjoyed, I think about joyous moments, joyous occasions. I think a lot of times we get this wrong. One article comes to mind when I think about this question. I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't remember the exact name, but it was more so like an editorial kind of post in a magazine about self-care. And it talked about how self-care isn't necessarily bubble baths and like chocolates and things like that. It's not always something that is pretty, but something that can contribute to our overall happiness. Those things might bring us joy in the moment. So joy being something that is more tangible, something like I love red lipstick. That's like my jam. It makes me feel empowered. It makes me feel whatever in the moment. But overall, depending on how life is going and what I need, that might not be happiness. That's more so it makes me feel joyful, just something that is in the moment. And I think it's very easy for us to confuse the two between joy and happiness. Instead, we a lot of times I think misspeak of joy as being something that is longer term when happiness is more longer term and just overall. So I think one, these two are possible. It is possible to achieve both joy and happiness, but I think it's important for us to understand what it is we're truly striving for, what we need, and what we deserve.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I often think about when I talk to clients, I talk about creating moments of joy, right?
Yes.
And so joy compounds over time that can give you happiness, right?
Yes.
And so your goal, you don't have to be joyful every moment of every day. That's not realistic, right? I think that might be nice. I don't know anyone who lives like that because we experience life. Yeah. But to say, like, did you experience any moments of joy today? Right. I think it's super important.
Yeah.
When I remember thinking about this critically a couple years ago. There's only like joy, happiness, there's these concepts, purpose that sometimes, we hear them, we use them, and then there are moments where it rings really clear and you feel like, oh, I get it today. Like today, I really get it. And one of those moments I had a couple years ago, but I still think about it, was when one of my mentors passed away. And I was off celebrating. I was on a cruise actually celebrating like my mom's birthday, right? And so I'm there celebrating this joyous moment, my milestone for my mother, and I get the news that one of my mentors passed, and I was actually gone during the time where they had his services and all of that stuff. And I found myself feeling like obviously very sad and hurt, and but at the same time, I could feel joy, right? And I thought like, oh, this is odd. I had this overwhelming sense of gratitude for, the connection that we had. And it also happened to be like around Thanksgiving. And so I was just in this gratitude moment thinking about what I'm thankful for. And I could be happy for the moments I was spending with my mom and my family on this trip, and also like still have like moments to grieve. And I was like, oh, this is it. Like I'm supposed to be able to feel joy even when painful things are happening. And I remember that so clearly because I think we think about when something bad happens as all encompassing, like this is a bad moment and this is a bad time. But the reality is true joy is something that you should be able to feel regardless of circumstance, right? And you need a moment of it, right, to be able to feel that. But I want to pause here and just see if there are any questions. What are Corey, any questions in the chat or in the Q&A? Folks have any questions about joy and happiness and like, what is this thing?
Yeah, I don't see any questions in the chat now, but if anybody wants to drop a question really quick, maybe we can take some time to answer it.
Yeah, while people are trying to drop stuff, and listen, drop stuff in the chat, even if it's your own experiences. I'm thinking about that acronym KISS, right? Keep it simple, sexy. I think that's the acronym, right? So I try to keep it really simple in that I understand that there are going to be times in where I am so frustrated, annoyed, and just like, ah, and yet still, I can see in total that because I'm able to eat and have shelter and have a good job and have great friends, I'm actually doing really, really, really well. And that's how simple I tend to try to keep it, because I remember going off to college and saying to myself, oh, this kind of sucks. I'm here by myself, whatever, whatever. I felt really sad, going through all kinds of depression, and then recognizing that there were certain things that were actually going really well. And if I just took the time to recognize and to keep focused on that, I was feeling a whole lot better and feeling more contentment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. I think that you're talking about like your mindset, right? And how you're even interpreting what's going on around you. I want to pivot to another question, but very much related. We're all on the same page now. Everyone's like, yep, I don't got no questions. I know what joy is. I know what happiness is. But for Black women in particular, why does our joy need to be radical? And I want to take a second to talk through, like, is it just radical on its own for, the mere fact that we're able to reach that stage, given all the stuff that we navigate in a day or in a lifetime? Or is there something else that we need to be doing that transforms our joy into something that is a radical act? And I'm going to pivot to Dr. Jill, if you can just respond to that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that joy should be radical. It can be radical. I don't think we necessarily have to be doing anything in particular. I think that's what we've been taught, that we need to be doing something or have some grand accomplishment in order to celebrate and just have a sense of joy. But I think it can be an everyday experience that happens, as Dr. Shelley has mentioned. Even just thinking about our basic needs being met. As you mentioned, Dr. Ty, even thinking about in that moment experiencing a great time with family, but also some mixed feelings around losing your mentor. I think it's something that definitely can be felt no matter what is going on. But in the Black community, especially from the South, depending on where people are from, there's this old saying that we are to be seen and not heard. However, when we're filled with joy, we often minimize that because of teachings and stereotypes like that. And we feel that we're not deserving of experiencing joy or have some sort of sense of guilt. And I think all of those experiences can lead to us self-sabotaging what radical joy can be and what it should feel like, what it looks like. Then there's this comparison, the social comparison. Radical joy looks like this for me versus someone else. And so I think we take that on as well. I think joy can be radical on its own for most people, but for us, it doesn't seem to be. But I think that has to be challenged. And I think that's also part of the reason that we're here today. So I think we must transform and unlearn what we've been taught. I think as Black women, we've been taught to be radical and outspoken. I think people also have a negative connotation of what radical necessarily means, but it doesn't have to have a negative connotation. And so I think when it comes to reaping the benefits of the fruits of our labor and that not being radical out loud in your face, there's this disconnect that happens about how we should celebrate and be celebrated.
And I'm here thinking, and I'm sorry here to just jump in a little bit, right?
Go for it.
But no. I'm on the here saying, yeah, preach, Dr. Jill. And I'm also saying that we need to be radical in our joy. Why? Because I am in America, and I'll tell you, okay, coming from Jamaica to the United States, there are so many people, Grinches, all over trying to steal my gosh darn joy. And I'm trying not to curse, because just coming, right? I'm celebrating an anniversary, flying in from Vancouver, which that's why I'm not at work, some of you all, okay? and trying to make it here. And here I come in smack dab on implicit bias, microaggression, discrimination at its most at TSA. And these are the reasons why I think radical, right? We have to be radical because there are too many spaces and places and people trying to cut you down and make you feel inferior and comparing you to what you're not, right? I'm not a tall white man. And even though there's nothing wrong with it, as I'm being compared to that in society, there's something wrong with that for me. And so that's why my joy has to be radical, because I refuse to make you steal what was positive and what was good that was going on in my life at that time. And so when I think of radical, sometimes I think of activism. I think of, you better not today, Satan, not today. That's what I'm thinking about.
And to add to your point, Dr. Shelley, I think that we have to be radical because we expect other people or this belief to be celebrated. And how do we expect others to celebrate us when we're not radical about our joy and our position in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah. I also hear like a differentiation around radical as I got louder versus radical as I am resisting what is trying to be taken from me. And I think that those don't have to be the same thing. I think being louder is one way that you can get more radical. And then I think there's others where you're like, that's not me, right? Like, I don't do that, doesn't feel naturally to me. But I think whatever it is that is your unique way that you communicate, you can be emboldened to do that more and to celebrate it in your own way. And so, yes, I think activism, but I also think being able to silence somebody, being able to carve out space for yourself when everybody is trying to take it away from you, that can be a radical act. It doesn't matter, like how it looks isn't really the point. The point is you are resisting, right? That is that which is trying to restrain you.
Oh my God, you're like a poet. Say that again. Somebody write that down. Right? Take away that is trying to restrain you. That's so beautiful. Yes.
Well, when I think about like, it sounds good, right? Radical joy sounds good. I feel like the chat people are like, yes, do this. Let's be radical about our joy. Taking care of yourself sounds good. But how do we move beyond the abstract, pretty picture of putting ourselves first and self-care and candles and bubble baths into the concrete realm where we're actually experiencing radical joy when we're busy, when we're overwhelmed, when we're being microaggressed against at work, and when we're trying to get a promotion, and when we're taking care of our elderly parents, and when we stub our toe and there's a new COVID variant, and all of the things, right? All of the things are happening, and we're still trying to make a lot of money, because that is also a common thread of this community. We're a bunch of incredible Black women making power moves, right? So I'm trying to do all these things and secure the bag. What does that look like for real? Like, how do I stay joyful? How do I be radical about my joy while that's happening? Dr. Jill.
What am I supposed to do?
What are we supposed to do, Dr. Jill?
Tell us.
I have learned, and then just being in a community of Black women, but I have learned, one of my good friends always says, life is lifing, because life is going to life no matter what we're doing, where we are. And that is something that for me, I've had to take on and have some ownership of, like, you know what, life is lifing right now. Let me take a second and breathe. So let me take a second and be grateful for what is going correctly, because everything else always ends up working itself out and doing what it needs to do. But life is going to life when we have all of these different things going on. Being microaggressed is a real thing, as Dr. Shelley mentioned earlier. Even at TSA, we walk out the door. That is something that we can be easily impacted by at any given point in time, when it's just like, okay, I'm just trying to go to the store and get my groceries today. But I think it's important that we learn to take breaks when needed. And be okay with that, be guilt-free around that, know that that is our second to recharge, that is our second to pause in life, that is our second to know that everything else can still happen that we are trying to accomplish. I always say that taking a break should not be a luxury, but it's a necessity. I think as Black women, that is something that we have guilt around a lot of times, is just slowing down and taking a moment, but also remembering that we can't pour from an empty cup. So if that one microaggression for the day, we're tapped out, that is okay. That is okay, and finding ways that we can come back the next day or hours later. But I think we've also taken on messages to constantly be in grind mode and take on this idea of toxic positivity, which is why taking breaks is important. You know, sometimes we might call a girlfriend and they're like, girl, you'll be all right. And that's true. But depending on who we are, what's going on, we might not need to hear that in the moment. And we just might need to say, you know, stuff is real right now, and figure out how to navigate from that point. Because being in grind mode and all of that sometimes allows us to ignore our needs. And then we're pouring from an empty cup and wondering why we're burned out and all of these different things. So even my own personal example, some people know this, but I quit my job because I was burned out and I was pouring from an empty cup. Like, it was something I had to step out on faith and do. And it was a hard decision. As much as I tried to plan strategically and had all these other business ideas going on, I was burned out. And so we have to know when to take a step back. And radical joy can be real if we want it to be, but again, remembering that it looks different for people across the board.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for saying that. I feel like you're talking about the very real implications of what it means to take care of yourself. Like, most of us are doing too much to actually add anything else to our plate. So to take care of yourself, you have to stop doing something else. And that isn't fair. It isn't fair that you have to not do something you want to do because somebody did something that ticked you off and now you have to go nurse yourself back to health, right? But it's the truth, and it's our reality. And I think there's this fear, it seems like, to be around time, that if I stop and pause and take care of myself, then I'm going to miss out. But I think that if we can shift away from operating out of that fear, we might be surprised at what we can do, like when we give ourselves the space, because we deserve it. Dr. Shelly, I'm going to let you jump in. Any thoughts? And then if you could share just like 3 tips if somebody's struggling with this, because this, like, we are saying this, but I think all of us are very real. It can be very real around the fact that this is hard. Like, this is not an easy thing to do. It is not easy to stop and pause and care for yourself when you've got a goal and a plan. But what would you say to folks that are struggling with doing this, like, moment to moment?
Well, you know, I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to try to condense these thoughts. Okay. Michelle Obama said, when they go low, you go high. And I think eventually you can go high. Okay. Eventually you can go high. So these are the tips that I think work. And of course, it depends on who you are. But yes, number one, who is your support system? Who is the person that you can vent to and you know they're going to give you the right freaking response? Okay. Because, you know, Suzette down the road may not be the one at that time, but you need to be able to have enough different people in your circle that you know that when I call and I say, girl, did you, or guy, did you hear this? They will, you know, the armor or the fight that you don't have in you, they will have that fight, even if it goes nowhere, but it makes you feel validated and bolstered and buoyed. And so that's one tip. Have a person, have some persons. Number 2, it is okay to feel like what the just happened to me, and take that space and time and dwell and think, and then recognize that this has nothing to do with you, and apply the compassion you need to apply for yourself, that you are deserving. And so this is the other thing. Get in your brain, not in your mind, not to dwell on that there is something wrong with you, but to push it back to the growth mindset that you just have. There's still more work to be done, and to validate yourself, right? And so and sometimes that will look like, you know, In-N-Out burger and chocolate shake. I don't know, but right, I'm not telling. But sometimes it will look like something, right, that will just make you feel comforted and good and just whole. And so I'm going to leave the third thing is, of course, having a fabulous therapist, like, a Dr. Jill or a Dr. Ty or a Dr. Shelly in your, right, that understands what you're going through. And so, but these are some of the things that I think about. I think about what helps me, and definitely strong support system is something that's big, and use of humor, being able to laugh or to turn it into some kind of joke while I'm even telling the story is also helpful.
Yeah, I love that. I think the support system is something that a lot of us struggle with, is finding folks that are on a similar path as you, that see you, that will validate you. And I think that that is something that I see with a lot of clients that I work with. A lot of folks have had maybe a bad experience when they were younger, or maybe not even younger, maybe not that long ago. They've had a bad experience with relationships, with friendships, and they've kind of given up, like, oh, I'm a team no new friends, or I'm gonna do this on my own. I only got me. And I am like, that is not acceptable. Like, that is not acceptable. And having a bad experience does not mean all people are untrustworthy. It does not mean that there are not people out there that can support you. And I think that being willing to be vulnerable enough to seek those relationships is so critical. So I'm so glad you brought that up. And I want to ask one more question. We're starting to get a couple questions in the Q&A. Other folks, if you have questions for us, please drop them in the Q&A. Before we get to those, I want to share. So I was listening to a talk by Dr. Tama Bryant Davis recently, and she reminded us in this talk it was a room full of incredible Black women. She reminded us that we are the ones we've been waiting for, that all the power we need to do more than just to survive, but the power that we need to fully live joyfully, the power we need to resist oppression and to be free is already within each of us. She shared that we as a collective, again, are the ones we've been waiting for. And as I sat there and just kind of let that sit with me, I also want that to sit with all of the folks listening today. But if you, Dr. Shelly, Dr. Jill, if you would share your thoughts on how we can be each other's keeper, do a better job at being each other's keeper. And from that space, like, how can we empower our sister friends to radically live in their joy? I think that's super important. I think oftentimes it's really hard to do it for yourself, even though that's what we're preaching. Sometimes it's a little easier for folks to see, like, let me support my sis, let me support, this person that I love. How can we think about how we can do better at supporting each other and expecting each of us to live radically in our joy? Maybe Dr. Shelly, can I start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You're touching on one of the factors in the formula of happiness, which is acts of kindness. And it doesn't necessarily have to be to like huge or to strangers, but to the person who is your colleague, your coworker, your friend, your family. Checking in, it doesn't have to also always be a phone conversation. It can be, I was thinking about you, and so I tag you in this post, which is a beautiful poem or a saying, or sending a text. Making sure though that if you're asking a question about how you're doing, you're actually pausing to hear the answer. That it's not just assumed that you're doing okay, and that sometimes even by just sharing some of the things that you've gone through, it may even give others the opportunity to say, yeah, me too, this kind of sucks. Because there is something to be said when everyone can kind of appreciate or understand that even though things may not be going well a lot of times, or even some of the times, that because we have each other, there's this optimism, there's this gratitude for our friendship, for our connection, that imbues us with this sense of resilience, right? That we can thrive because it's not just us. There's more than just us. And so I think about what you just said with Dr. Bryant. I mean, I love going on her Instagram feed, and I'm always just like, post this, repost, because there is something to be said about when it's reminders. It's not that we're saying things that you don't know already. It's that you don't remember when you're so steep sometimes in life. And the reminder from your friend, from your therapist, from your colleague is what then helps you to become aware that, hey, yeah, there is more to it than just this. There's something else to look forward to. And that's what the connection between us will do.
I love that. I love that. And Corey, if you will drop Dr. Tama Bryant Davis's Instagram link in the chat, that would be amazing, because she is an amazing Black psychologist that I think we should all be following. I'm going to let Dr. Jill jump in.
I love that Dr. Bryant said that, because I think similar to what you mentioned, Dr. Ty, there are so many of us that have that narrative that I've had a bad experience with friends. I'm on my own. We don't have similar goals. And that is so prominent for Black women and Black professional women to have that story, but it's also unfortunate. So I think that is one of the reasons people find it very hard to have almost like an accountability partner or a sister friend when they need it in these moments of reaching or achieving radical joy. So one thing that comes to mind is changing our language around just that kind of grind mode mentality, changing our language around that, but also being more attuned to what is needed by our friends. So maybe it's not necessarily going out for a drink at the moment, but we both need some self-care because we often need it too. So maybe we're going to go for a walk or a hike or something like that, so we can be in the moment and really be present with each other. And, just listening, checking in, and not when it's just, something going on or something major, because then a lot of times people feel very empty and used and like they only call me when something is going on. But I think what Dr. Shelley was saying, when I was listening to you speak, Dr. Shelley, I heard empowerment. I heard, those posts and those things that kind of go a long way in the moment, whether it's sharing a post, sending a text message, picking up the phone, those things allow us to feel empowered, but also to share the empowerment with our sister friends.
Yes. Shelly, that's the silent yes.
That's right. That's like on the nose, on the nose.
Like, is she muted? You're like, no, she's not muted. Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And we are getting some questions. I think we should answer the questions from our audience. Corey, if you could help us out and just share some questions with us, we'd love that.
Yeah, so we have 2 questions in the Q&A. So question is, number 1 is, if you could travel back in time and visit your younger self, what would you tell her about living radically in joy? And what is your hope for the next generation? We also have an additional question. Why do you think it's so hard to radically choose joy? And I feel this one in my spirit, even when we know that we desperately need it. So I'm not sure which one you guys want to tackle first.
Let's start with that first question. Time travel, we're traveling back in time. What do you need to tell your younger self about radical joy? And I guess that is very much connected to, like, what is your hope for the next generation?
Man, I'm just thinking that my 20s was a mess. My 20s was really a mess. I lived such a sheltered life. And then when I got to the United States, it was like a whole adjustment thing. I was depressed the whole time. People thought I was Eeyore. And so going back, I think I would be telling my 16-year-old self, because that's when I think it went downhill, right? I came 16 and I was like, no one's there to take care of me anymore. But I would say to myself then that it's only going to get better, that these challenges are growth opportunities, because to be better, there has to be some stress. It has to. You cannot be better at anything without some challenge and some stress. And so I would just remind or say to myself, kind of become my own motivational speaker. You got this, you got to do this, right? Because you're going to be so fly, and we don't use that term anymore, but whatever, at the end.
I love it. I love it.
Man, that question, that grind mode stuff I've been talking about, that's what I would tell myself. Like, let that narrative go. Things will still get accomplished. That is something that I was very tunnel vision and was not in the moment. With myself, with others, because it was complete like grind mode, grad school, like a bunch of foolishness, and it still got done, whether, I was tunnel vision or not, it was still going to get done. So younger me would say to be in the moment. And I like that you mentioned the part about stress, Dr. Shelley, because I've had to learn that not all stress is bad, even though we're taught that. But when we experience, it's like the application goes out of the window. But not all stress is bad, but it gets us to the next level. And discomfort creates growth a lot of times. And it's okay to be uncomfortable. But it's also okay to listen to your body and what it is that we need, because our body's going to respond every single time that things are out of alignment, and to always, always, always trust the process.
I love that. I think if I tag on just to the hope for the next generation, it would be that the next generation doesn't have as many meltdowns and breakdowns and illnesses and sicknesses that I think our generation and generations before has had. I've shared, and even in previous parts of this series, how I worked myself into pneumonia twice before I finally figured it out, like that ain't cute, and I don't have to do that to be successful and excellent. And what I hope is that the next generation takes that wisdom from us and can build off of that, and will learn to pause and protect yourself and accept the consequences, whether they are good, they are bad, they're all of the things, accept the consequences that come along with that. Because I think one of the consequences is a self-prioritization and a strengthening of the self. And I would love to see what that breeds in the next generation, right? I think that would be really beautiful. There are a ton of really good questions. Corey, what is the next question?
She had read that one. Read it again, Corey.
So the next question, sorry, I forgot to unmute. Why do you think it's so hard to radically choose joy, even when you know that we desperately need to?
Did they watch The Blessings and the Burden of the Black woman? Okay, because I'm going to refer you back to that Blessings and the Burden, right? Right. It's almost like there's this guilt. Like, how many of us, because we're also, I think, this high performing, that when you're resting or when you're doing something pleasurable, there's also in the back of your head, isn't there something else I'm supposed to be doing that is supposed to be work? Like, it just feels it's not normal. Because I think we've been brought up into a society where it hasn't normalized women to be joyful and pleasurable without seeming like it's attached to not being competent or lazy or some other negative term, and that we have to get through that brainwashing and through that, oppressive thoughts. That's what I'm thinking.
Absolutely. I'm looking up early on in the chat. Someone asked, what is toxic positivity? I think, I'm not sure who mentioned that, Dr. Jill or Dr. Shelley. One of you meant Dr. Jill. Okay, can you break that down a little bit?
Sure. So toxic positivity is this phenomenon that's more recent, or at least with the actual title to it. It's gone on for years, but it's really prominent in the Black community, where we're always being positive. Like the person who's giving the feedback is always positive, which one has consequences. It can be very draining on the body, mentally and physically. But then the person who's on the receiving end, that makes them feel invalidated a lot of times. So that's in sum what toxic positivity is. And it's toxic because sometimes that might not be what people need. And then there's consequences for that, but that also a lot of times people who are saying these things are also trying to kind of give themselves a pep talk, and that might not be what they need or what they need to hear. So it's just this toxic cycle that happens.
Yeah, because it doesn't even help you at the end. I know this person. I know the person you're talking about, Dr. Jill.
Right.
Yeah,
it's really bad though. It's something that, I think going back to that last question that was just asked about why we don't and can't celebrate radical joy, a lot of the times that is why, because we're too busy focused on the positive, which is fine. Nothing is wrong with that at all. But sometimes we just need the real place to just kind of dump our mess, whether, it's on ourselves and we're kind of navigating that with our therapist or whatever. And I think it creates this illusion or this false sense of reality a lot of times that this isn't really going on. It creates avoidance and all these other defense mechanisms that, doesn't get the job done. We need to heal and do what we need to do.
And it's kind of annoying to be around somebody who, I mean, you can tell it's kind of like it comes off almost like false, right?
Yes,
that
totally.
there is a bravado or a false positivity, but the reason what makes it toxic is because it's not actually that you feel positive and are doing something about it. It's that it's a defense and it's coloring over. And so it's actually making things worse. It's almost like an abscess, right? There's battered blood beneath the skin and it needs to be exercised. And I'm sorry to get medical here, but I had an abscess and that was really bad. And then the other thing that I thought about when you were saying this is I can't remember. So let's move it past me.
Well, we have several more questions in the Q&A. Corey, can you queue up the next question in the Q&A for us?
Yeah, so I actually, I'm not sure if I have access to the remainder of the questions. I only see the 3 questions that were answered.
Okay, let me see. I see one that says, sometimes I think my guilt about not working stems from my dislike of where I live. In a PhD program in a very white place and university. I think most of us on stage can relate to that. So I feel like I'm going to cause myself to spend more time to get my degree if I don't work as hard as I can. Yes, I still struggle with the idea that happiness will come at a specific moment, i.e. like when I leave. Yeah. Ooh, there's a lot there, right? Yeah, if either of you have something to say, I want to comment that the happiness comes later is a misunderstanding of what it is what happiness and what joy is, right? So remember again, happiness, joy, you should be able to feel that across any circumstance. Your body is capable, your mind is capable of processing multi levels of emotions, and you should be chasing that regardless. So if you are in a hellhole of a situation, it is even more critical that you are being intentional about creating moments of joy. So it might not be possible to be super happy all day long when you're in a situation that you don't like, but you definitely then need to create moments of joy every day so that actually compounds. So that's what the research tells us about happiness. The moments of happiness and joy compound over time and lead to you having a better life. So we do not want to be in the waiting to find it. But either of you have something else? Yeah, Dr. Shelly.
Well, I think here it's that we know, it's unfortunate, but we do know that if it's the job, if it's the school, if it's where we live, that there's something that tells us that this isn't right. The problem is that there's been such an investment in some of the places that we find ourselves that we are then looking for like the writing in the sky that says, bail out, girl, bail out. And we're not going to get it because our internal sense is already telling us that it is. So what do we do in that case? Well, it's not that sometimes it's easy to just bail out, because you've invested. And so there can be another thing in what we talk about with this critical consciousness, right? It's coming from liberation psychology, Black psychology, which is that if I use it in just its more basic sense, is that we understand that shit is going down and that we can still plan and do something in spite of the shit going down. Mm-hmm. And so you may just have to say to yourself, okay, can I do this for a time and then get the hell out of that? Or do I need to just figure out a plan now?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It also made me think about, I think it's called destination happiness. Don't quote me on that right now, but where we tend to move around from place to place or situation to situation seeking happiness. So just because our destination changes or shifts, then we all of a sudden become happy, which isn't necessarily true happiness. So that's one piece to think about, is that are you chasing something that is like destination. Is your happiness contingent upon the destination or the space that you're in the moment? And then the other piece is, no matter what, your graduate school process or whatever process is your process, no matter what that looks like. And if it takes you longer to finish that program, then in order to have radical joy, then do just that. If you feel like you need to leave that program, then do just that. Do whatever will allow you to achieve radical joy. And I think that's something that we suffer from. I mean, this is a perfect example of just the guilt that we experience a lot of times from just taking a break, taking longer, or whatever the case may be. But everybody's journey is their own.
Absolutely. There's a couple more questions. There's 2 more questions. I want to touch on them. I'm going to ask each of you to respond maybe like 1 minute to these as we push forward. This first question says, what advice do you give women who tend to be the only strong friend in the space and the people around you can't handle nor understand you? Ooh, good question. Yes, good question.
I feel like we need to flip a coin.
No, Dr. Jill, because that's my question. So go ahead.
Oh man. The idea of the strong friend is a real thing. It also makes me think about Black women as often being strong women being the face of depression a lot of times. And so I think being the strong friend can definitely have a lot of consequences to it. And if people can't handle that, if that is who we truly are, our authentic selves, then we might need to kind of shift what that friend group looks like, because then again, burnout exists, and pouring from an empty cup exists. And, then what is being given in return? Do you have a place to go in order to have a strong friend or have someone pour into you? What does that look like? And so I think when and if someone is being left empty from being that strong person all the time, I mean, we are, in addition to the stereotypes of being a strong Black woman, yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot to manage.
Mm-hmm. I just want to add on to that, Dr. Jill, that one, for sure, I think we have this issue where you may not have the support around you that you need, and therefore your job is to build community around yourself. You have to build community. And I think sometimes part of that is you need to assess whether the community you have around you can support you, and you're assuming that they cannot, right? And so have you allowed yourself to be vulnerable enough to ask for what you need? Have you put yourself in a position to receive? And I find a lot of us have not. Like, did you ask somebody, like, I need to talk to you, I am not well? And I think you need to test your environment to see what it can sustain before, and then maybe in addition to going out and making sure that getting more support that you need.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. There was another question here about positivity, and it says, if the world wants us as Black women to not feel good in our minds and our bodies, isn't it ideal for us to nourish our thoughts with positivity and promote our body's healing process? And I just want to comment, I do think it's important to use positivity, but like Dr. Jill was saying, I think that I think what's more important than being positive is being accurate, right? So positive isn't always true, and your body will reject what is false, right? And so you can tell yourself, it's great. The day is beautiful. And like, you might be able to power yourself through something to do that. But if you can tell yourself what is real, like, this happened, but I'm also grateful for this, like, just what is true, that is less toxic positivity and more accurate, right? And looking for what is true and beautiful in your situation in addition to. So I just wanted to distinguish, it's not just about being positive, it's about being accurate with yourself. Okay, I love that there's been so many questions. I wish we could keep having this conversation forever, but I'm guessing Dr. Jill and Shelly got folks to see, people to heal, lots of things to
Spells
do.
to cast.
Spells to cast, all of the things. Joy to be had, right?
That one.
If folks in the audience, as we wrap up, if you'll just share in the chat just one thing that resonated with you as we talked today, what's one thing that you were going to take with you and continue to think about, continue to chew on for a little bit, let us know. And then I want to just ask everyone to breathe with us for a second and kind of reground yourself as we get ready to shift out of this session. If you can just take a moment and take a big deep breath in, and then nicely go ahead and exhale out nice and slow through your mouth. Continue to do that. Just go ahead and breathe in deeply. Breathe out nice and slow. Let your eyes fall if you need to, if it feels comfortable. Allow yourself to feel the weight of your body, whether you're seated or if you're standing, just wherever you're planted. Notice the weight of your body in that position. With your next inhalation, I want you to welcome in joy as your birthright. It's kind of deep. Go ahead and inhale joy as your birthright. Exhale slowly. As you continue to inhale, imagine yourself with an ability to let in joy throughout your day, regardless of your circumstance. Commit that you can find a way to experience joy, that you will find a way to experience joy, regardless of your circumstance. I want you to breathe out and exhale all of the thoughts that come to steal your joy. You are inhaling joy as your birthright. You are exhaling all of the things, the mindset, the thoughts, the struggles that try to steal it away from you. You're going to release it. One more deep breath in. Breathe in the spirit of joy. Exhale everything that seeks to steal it. Then go ahead and shift your attention back to your body. Feel the weight of your body planted wherever you are. Allow your attention to come back to the space. And I just want to say thank you for sharing this moment with us. Each and every time we are in community with you all, it is a special occasion. This concludes our first YouTube series. We hope that you all enjoyed it as much as we have. We have taken a journey over the past few months that we hope has left you feeling seen and connected to the light and the power inside of you in a way that will propel you forward and not hold you back. In part one of this series, we talked about the blessings and the burden of strength. We shared our own stories of how we learned to see strength. We dove into the historical context of how the strong Black woman persona came to be. We parsed out the good from the bad of that identity, and we closed with affirming the future we are manifesting of what strength can look like for us. In part two, entitled Moving Beyond Working Twice as Hard, we explored the early messages we received about working twice as hard. We discussed how to notice when we've taken that advice as far as it can take us. And we produced some strategies for how to shift our mindset so we're able to live in the balance between our ambition and honoring our journey and standing in our power. And finally, today, we closed our series by discussing the meaning of joy and happiness and its connection to happiness. We then explore the significance of radicalizing our joy as Black women and strategizing ways in which we can make joy real and a reoccurring experience for us. If you missed any part of the series, they are posted, the series is on YouTube. We will be sharing this part as well. We hope you will continue to watch, like, and share from the series. In the interim, if you want more from the Black Girl Doctor team, just sharing that we offer group wellness coaching for anyone who wants real strategies, community, and accountability for claiming and maintaining a life that has an abundance of love, money, and happiness. Those are our tenants here. We are always trying to grow our love, money, and happiness. We also provide virtual therapy, and we recently launched in Georgia, Florida, and Virginia, and Hawaii this month. So if you are looking for a therapist, we hope you will consider our team. We send weekly newsletters and are available to deliver workshops and well-being assessments in your workplace. All of that information and more you can find on our websites. Corey is dropping that information in the chat, our website, links to wellness coaching, and our Instagram page. So hopefully you're following along on our Instagram page. And I'll also just note that if any part of this conversation was triggering for you for any reason, and you're interested in speaking with a therapist, please utilize the directory resources or one of the crisis services resources that we are also dropping in the chat. The directories will help you find a licensed provider that is in your state. And the crisis resources are national, they're always free, and they're available 24/7. Dr. Jill, Dr. Shelly, thank you both so much for today. And I'd like to give you the final word. For each of you, just share a final thought as we close out our session for today. We'll start with Dr. Jill and then Dr. Shelly if you jump right in.
Yes, this was amazing. I knew it would be good, but this was really amazing. And I feel rejuvenated and all of that. So it is my hope that we have shared information with everyone listening today. And you can take something away. And just keep in mind that as a Black woman, being and experiencing radical joy does not have to be impossible. It is a very real thing.
Thank you again, Dr. Ty and Dr. Jill. I wanted to just close to remind us of our spirituality and our closeness with something other that also helps to feed our resilience and our joy, as well as our happiness. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Sending each of you blessings for love, money, and happiness.